I think the problem is that not everybody's buying in,
No.
whether it's teams or drivers or sponsors.
When you start putting new tires on and you go out there and say, man, I could go lickety-split faster than a speeding train, but I better take care of these things because in 10 laps I'm going to be looking like I'm swatting bumblebees in here.
I don't know. I love racing. I love the competitiveness of it and being able to grow up in it. It was a pretty good childhood.
Welcome on to the Backstretch. I am News 5's Heather Williams, and it is race weekend here at the Bristol Motor Speedway. Of course, this would be my home track, I guess. Well, I guess one of several that I claim because I'm from Kansas, and that's my OG home track. But I live here in Bristol now, and so I'm so excited for this race weekend. The hot topic this weekend is going to be, of course, tire wear. When we were here in the spring, it was crazy. It was a little bit of chaos. Drivers, crew chiefs, media members didn't know what to think, what to expect of the excessive tire wear that we had during the race. It made for a fantastic race at Bristol, but nobody knew what happened what caused it. I mean, there were theories about the track prep and the weather and the softer tires. But the crazy thing is that when they came back in the fall, it was like none of that happened. It was like, oh, forget that. That was just a mirage. Well, drivers aren't convinced that it's a mirage. We'll see what happens this weekend when the drivers hit the track, because there is a possibility it's going to be cooler. There is a possibility that we could see some of that tire wear. So we'll talk about that with our crew chief, Chris Carrier, along with a couple of other topics of the weekend. Then we're also going to have our guest this week, John Hunter Nemechek. I actually talked to John a week ago, but I thought this was a good week to bring him on and just we talk a little bit about the rebuilding of Legacy Motor Club, or the building up of Legacy Motor Club. They had a miserable season last year, but they're having a much better year this year. So we'll talk about what the changes were and why John Hunter thinks that things are going well with Legacy. We'll also talk about the fact that the only break of the season is coming next week. It's going to be a brutal second half of the season. It's not really a half. It's like a 2/3 of the season with no breaks for drivers and crews. So we'll talk about that with John Hunter as well. Let's get it rolling.
Joining us now is our crew chief, Chris Carey, who's also the crew chief of the number 75 Food Country Truck in the Craftsman Truck Series. Denny Hamlin goes back-to-back with a win at Darlington. It is now 11th all-time on the NASCAR wins list, just 4 wins behind Kevin Harvick for 10th. He by far has the most wins of any driver without a championship. So does he need a title to be considered one of the all-time greats, or is he already there?
Well, in my mind he is, but when it gets 15 years down the road from now, after he retires anyway, probably the people at that time, or 20 years down the road, whatever, will probably judge whether or not he has championships. I'm not telling you that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that people that actually don't witness his talent, okay, and they stack him up against the drivers that are going to be the best drivers of that time, 15, 20 years down the road, and then stack him up against the Richard Pettys and David Pearsons and Dale Earnharts and Darrell Waltrips and Kevin Harvicks and Kyle Larsons and so on and so forth. They're going to, a lot of people will say, he never won a championship.
So what's the opinion of Mark Martin? Because Denny right now is 15 or 16 wins ahead of Mark Martin.
Well, I mean, I have never had the pleasure of working with Denny. I did get to work with Mark Martin just a little bit, and we raced, teams I was working on raced against Mark a lot, and he was hard to beat most of the time. When he was in real good equipment, which most of the time he was, he was hard to beat in the Busch Grand National Series, now Xfinity, and also in Jack Roush's Cup cars. So I would, I would put them kind of neck and neck, really.
Even though Denny has more wins, more crown jewels.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Denny has won a few more bigger races, you know, than Mark did. And man, Heather, it's
I think
hard.
what might be clouding your head a little bit is that Mark had so much more success in the Busch Grand National / Xfinity Series level than Denny has. But Cup Series for Cup Series, when I look at Denny's resume, it far exceeds Mark Martin because he has way more Daytona 500s.
Yep.
He has 16 more wins now, or 15, I can't remember what the number is. And he's still going. He's still got at least the rest of this year.
I mean, he could go, you know, he could feasibly, he's pretty doggone good at Bristol too.
Right.
And he could feasibly
won
win
in the
3
spring.
in a row. And he won in the spring last year. So I think Denny really, I think Denny is an underrated driver by a lot of people, and they still keep coming back to that. Well, he hasn't won a championship. He hasn't won a championship. I get it. I think that's a little bit unfair, a little bit.
Well,
but
especially in this era where championships are somewhat the flip of a coin at one track.
I agree 100%. If we had the old system and compared apples to apples and oranges to oranges, then some of the perceptions or some of the way we view some drivers might be a lot different. Personally, I have a lot of respect for Denny because of this. He came from late model, short track racing, beat and bang, grind. He did not have a big budget following him up the ladder. His performance and his ability and his promise for success was what got him in the door along the way and got him into good race cars, and he took advantage of those race cars. I remember the first time he ran a road course was at Mexico City. I never will forget this, and I guess it was in a Gibbs Xfinity car, which was nationwide at the time, I think, you know, and they said, this kid's Denny Hamlin's going to drive for Gibbs down there. And I remember thinking, wow, that's a stretch, you know. I guess they just want to get him some experience. He kicked their hind ends. And I'm like, wait a minute, who is this guy? You know, well, he raced up there at South Boston. He's from up there in that area, runs short tracks and late models and stuff. And I don't know, his car control, his throttle control, and his ability to go fast and take care of those rear tires is a talent and an ability, a skill that not everybody has, you know, but it is a mark of a great race car driver. You know, footwork is the king, and I think Denny's proven he's got that. Plus all else he's involved in. He owns a team that has a couple cars, and his co-owners, I think he played volleyball.
Yeah,
something
maybe
like that.
something a little
something
bit.
like that. But you know, he's into everything. He's got a lot of irons in the fire. And somebody asked me why I liked him the other day. You know what? I said, well, you know, he's the only one that's got the salt nowadays to tell it like it is.
Yeah.
And he doesn't mind to throw NASCAR in the sandbox, or anybody else for that matter. If it's another driver, if it's a spotter or whoever that he thinks is not, you know, he's pretty tough on people in the whole sport. You know, next thing I know, he'll be cussing me. So you know, that's okay. That's okay. But good for him. He was there at the right time on Sunday, and he gave credit to his pit crew.
Oh yeah.
He went out of the way to give credit to his pit crew. They got him last week. He said they got me 2 wins last week and this week. He said they did the job, and that was the truth. And then his job was to nail the restart, and oh boy, whew,
he was gone. Lights out.
Gone. So a win for him.
Yes. And the spring race at Darlington where he won is generally known as the NASCAR Throwback Weekend. A lot of drivers and media say it has run its course, but I haven't heard much from the fans about this. So,
me neither.
Has the Throwback Weekend passed its prime?
I think that...
Because I personally love it.
I do too. I think I see a few that really thrill me.
There was a Morgan McClure throwback last week.
Yes.
That was
it's spot
perfect.
On. It's spot on.
Perfect.
They did a great job of that. I've got mixed feelings about it. Some of them you know, are so good, and the feeling is so good. It just warms my heart to see it when they honor people that I know deserve honor. You know, the Wood brothers and Richard Petty and so on and so forth. There's so many that some might be a little bit cheesy, kind of.
Well, I think the problem is that not everybody's buying in.
No.
Whether it's teams or drivers or sponsors, you don't get full buy-in. And you can tell which teams have which race teams, not organizations, but which race teams have full buy-in based on how good their throwback looks. I mean, the 5-car throwback to Terry Labonte in his last win at Darlington was amazing. Some of the other Hendrick throwbacks, I couldn't even tell were throwbacks.
Right.
And then Chase Elliott was one of the drivers who was in the garage area saying, I think this has kind of run its course. So, of course, it's not going to be amazing if there's not full buy-in.
That makes sense. I guess it's, I don't know if there's a way that we could, when I say we, NASCAR and the NASCAR community, not, you know, NASCAR's really not got anything to do with this. They don't push this. They didn't, you know, there's no monetary reward. There's no points or anything like that. They're just sitting back watching. And of course, I'm sure they enjoy it and they like it. But if there's some way that, like we said, we could get, you know, like full buy-in from everybody, maybe there's just a few too many, and we need to pick about 10 every year, and everybody, you know, let it rotate and kind of have a little contest about it or something, you know, so there would be more focus. Maybe it might be that there's so many that you can't really give much focus, and you don't, not enough of us, I'm going to say fans, because I'm one too, not enough of us can learn enough about what that throwback is really about, because there's too many. And
I want all the throwbacks. I want all 38 cars to be throwbacks.
Well, I mean, that could be the deal,
At Darlington, how cool would it be? But then maybe it needs some focus in that maybe they say, you know, this year we're going to throw back to the 70s. And everybody pick a driver from the 70s or a car or race team from the 70s.
That's a good idea.
But there's just something about this weekend. I'm a history nerd, so obviously my perspective is skewed from other people. But again, as I said in the lead into this, I did not hear a single fan, and I have not heard a single fan say anything but great things about this. One of the drivers said, and I don't know if it was Brad or Denny, someone who has been in the sport a little bit longer said, this is not about the drivers and whether or not we think it's run its course. This is for the fans. We're out here every week for the fans. And so if the fans love the throwbacks, in my opinion, we should just keep doing it.
Yeah. And one thing about it too is what it brings too, as our fan base, you know, is going to get a little bit younger, you know, as time goes on. You know, the throwback approach is a good way that younger fans can learn history of NASCAR, and I think that I will expand on that. I think that if younger fans take the time and get the opportunity to learn about the history of our sport, they're going to. I'm confident enough to say that they're going to buy in. They're going to want to learn more about this sport, and they're going to want to be more involved in it, and they're going to enjoy what we see now more, knowing what guys 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40, 50, 60 years ago did to bring this sport up to what it is right now.
Well, and I think it would also help with the education, because I think, you know, everybody's going, oh, Carl Edwards needs to be in the Hall of Fame, and Jeff Burton and Ricky Rudd or whoever, and they do all. But I also think that there are a ton of people that ran in the 70s and the 80s and the 60s that they're not in the Hall of Fame that modern day race fans don't know about. And
that's true.
Just think that this could maybe help educate them as well.
I think I'm 100% about that. I think that if younger or newer fans, maybe they're not younger, maybe they're just happen not to have been a race fan until now. They might be 50 or 60 years old or something, but the more they find out and learn about this sport and this business and the people that have been in it and, you know, before now, and maybe they are still in it, but the guys, the history of it, the soldiers that fought all the, quote, battles, and I'm not trying to compare us to actual, you know, war heroes or what, but you know, I think it will draw more interest, and people will get more interest and more excited about it, and try to dig in and find more about it. And when they go to the racetrack or they watch the race on TV, they'll feel like they're more of a part of it, and they know more about it, so they can kind of enjoy more and know more about what's going on now, and maybe why we do some things the way we do. You know, how it came to this. So I don't know. I don't think the throwback stuff is going to go away. I think too many people like it. They may adjust it. They may, you know, and again, this is not something that NASCAR does. It just happens to be in NASCAR races. I think it's the community that's done it, the car owners, and I don't even really know who come up with the first idea. I wouldn't know. It wasn't me, but
somebody decided to do it at the Southern 500 several years back, and they switched it to this weekend because it was too important of a race for the playoffs, and sponsors weren't buying in to be able to change their paint scheme, because they wanted in the cutoff race or playoff race their primary paint scheme. So they shifted it to this weekend to accommodate the sponsors.
Well, that makes sense. I think that makes sense. But
it actually would make way more sense if they did it in the Southern 500, because that's the most historic race. Historic other than the Daytona 500 that we run.
True. I think it's a cool thing. A lot of people get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Okay, some people, I guess, don't really care that much maybe, or whatever, or just don't look at it that way. But there are a lot of people that get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Obviously, I'm next to one of them. And, you know, again, people like my age, people the old school people, we like that it's happening because it just shows that, hey, people are trying to remember. People are trying to focus, draw attention on what happened, you know, again, 20, 30, 40 years ago. The drivers, the crew chiefs, the owners, the color scheme of the cars that were, at the time, you know, it wasn't just 2.5 hours of putting a wrap on, man. It was sanding and bondoing and primering and painting and painting the letters, and you know, it goes way back. And I mean, I can remember all that, I hate to say, but it was pretty cool. It was difficult, and people took a lot of pride in that. When we got a local guy, Jerry Honeycutt, that used to do all the cars around here in Johnson City. Jerry's a great man, good friend of mine, and I watched in amazement as a pretty young guy.
Talented artist.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, what he did with race cars was art.
Yes, and he used to come up to Ed Whitaker's shop, you know, in the evening after he got done with all his jobs in the day, and Ed's wife Maxine would feed him supper and everything, and he'd go up and he'd get out his paint brushes and everything, and here he'd go. And I remember, you know, sitting there watching, thinking, how in the world is he doing it? How in the world does he do this? And he painted and he lettered many, many, many race cars. And I just feel fortunate to know one of those people. There were many of them that did it all over the racing, at least the Southeast, and I'm sure everywhere else across the country, because, you know, there wasn't such a thing as vinyl letters.
Right.
You didn't stick nothing on. There were a few fender stickers, and anyway, we'll see where it goes. Maybe every race will be a throwback.
I just say, if you don't like it, keep your mouth shut. Don't rain on my parade. But anyway,
that's right.
No, you can say your opinion. Just don't rain on my parade. All right, NASCAR heads to Bristol, your favorite track this weekend. With the craziness that happened last year with the tire wear, what can we expect this year?
Well, you know, Heather, that's a great question. You know, they ended up making some subtle changes, but not changing a whole lot before the fall race, and then the fall race,
it was like it never happened.
Went fine. So it was almost like some kind of a sci-fi thing. But, you know, I'm sure that right now a lot of Cup teams are thinking, okay, if the weather's just like it was last spring, if temperature and track conditions and so on and so forth are like they are we going to run into the same problem?
Well, the one thing I know from last spring to now is they're not using the resin, they're going to use the PJ1.
They're using PJ1.
So, I mean, the combination of the weather and the PJ1 or the resin is the only thing that people have been able to come up with as far as what happened, but it's not really like a logical explanation of what happened.
No, not really. I know they are pressing to put PJ1. I know they're actually pressing to put PJ1 down before the truck race on Friday. They're full speed ahead on that. If Dave Dirks could just do something about the rain that's supposed to be there, I don't know what he does on it. But anyway, obviously they can't spray it in the rain, so we'll see. And I'm right now, I'd say there's a lot of people that are kind of biting their fingernails and you know, going through their notes and trying to see something that might jump out and say, okay, maybe this is the reason, or this is what happened, or plan for this, or plan for that, or expect this. They're just going to show up and unload and start practicing and qualifying and have a race on.
You know, there are a lot of drivers that are actually hoping that they get that again. A lot of the drivers that I've talked to this week say that that was one of the most fun races they've had at Bristol. Even the ones that didn't run very well said that it was fun.
It has to be. I mean, when you start putting new tires on and you go out there and say, man, I could go lickety-split faster than a speeding train, but I better take care of these things, because in 10 laps I'm going to be looking like I'm swatting bumblebees in here with, you know, for the steering wheel. That challenges drive. That's what you know, they like that, because it actually takes skill that sometimes they don't get to use. You know, usually they're used to turning the wheel about that much, and here I go, and turn it about that much, and here I go, and you know, I think it really gets boring. So, you know, they're in there with this. Last year spring, man, they were fighting like crazy inside those cars, and they did it for the whole race. And you're right. I think a lot of them got out and said, man, I don't know if I did any good or not, but that sure was fun. You know, and those guys like to have fun. That's really, they didn't start racing simply because, well, this is the best thing I can do. They started it because it was fun. They wanted to have fun doing what they were, you know, what they were able to do. And you know, when they get to do something like this, it like sticks in their mind. They don't get to do it very often, and if it's not something that's really dangerous, that's going to get somebody really hurt, which I don't think it did. There was no real danger of it. Your tires are going to wear out. So I think they just have a blast. Maybe they will again this time. We don't know.
Joining us now is John Hunter Nemechek, driver for Legacy Motor Club. And John Hunter, I got to start with this. You guys are off to a good start this season. I know last season for you guys was not at all what you had envisioned for yourselves. So how good does it feel to kind of get out to this start and kind of prove that last year was the anomaly and not the standard there at Legacy?
Yeah, it feels really good to get our year kicked off this year with such a solid start and having some pretty good finishes, considering where we ended last year, or ended the 2024 season. So consistency is key for us coming into this year. A lot of personnel changes, a lot of process changes, a lot of procedural changes during the off season. For myself, there's only one person on the 42 team that is the same from last year. Everyone else is new. Some have been at Legacy Motor Club for the last year or so in different roles, and have transferred over to the 42 car, and as well as some outside hires. So a lot of new for me this year, again, going into 2025, but it seems like everyone has been gelling. Seems like our communication has been really strong. Been able to execute and finish races the last couple weeks, I feel like, better than where our car may have potential, but being able to do that and kind of show speed at times and unload with speed has been really solid. It's not just myself in the 42 car, but also Eric in the 43 has shown up and had speed, and Jimmy ran really well at the Daytona 500 as well. So it's a solid start to our year. We're not where we want to be as far as not in victory lane and winning races and whatnot, but small steps are big wins for us right now.
So when you're able to get up to a start like this, you're not feeling like you're having to spend the whole year digging out of a hole. Does it change the goals, the perspective, the way that you approach the rest of the season, or is this what you expected? It's what you went into the season kind of shooting for?
Yeah, so I think my goal this year was to run top 20 every week. And And that would be a huge improvement from where we ended 2024 or where we ran in 2024. So for myself, we've been able to achieve that so far. I think our worst finish is 22nd so far at COTA. But overall, I feel better as a driver. I feel more comfortable in the car. I feel like the potential that our cars have going to the racetrack have definitely been better than where we were last year. But I came into this year really with no expectations, right? We all knew that we were going to be better than what we were in 2024 with all the changes over the offseason, but not really knowing how much better. Now we've had 2 super speedway races, a road course race, a short track, and an intermediate race. And we've kind of been able to see where we stack up speed wise and qualifying for those raw speed. And then we've also been able to kind of see where we stack up in race trim as well. So we know that we still have some more work to do to get to where we want to be on a weekly basis and contending for wins and running up front. But right now, it's definitely solid and something that we can continue to build off of.
Looking forward to the next group of races. I see a lot of tracks in there that were good tracks for you in the lower series, Xfinity and Truck. Are you excited about this stretch? You've got Martinsville and Darlington and Bristol in there. This seems like this could be a good little run of tracks for you and your team.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like you said, I've had success there in the lower series for sure. Bristol, we ran really good there last year in the Cup car as well. Darlington, I feel like, is a great racetrack. Martinsville, I've had success there in the truck and in the Xfinity series, but we struggled in the Cup car there last year pretty bad, the 2 races that we ran. So that's one that's circled to kind of see what improvements we've been able to make over the offseason to our cars and trying to make them better. So we'll see. I'm really excited to get to Homestead this weekend, though. Another 1.5 mile racetrack for us after Vegas last weekend, and see what we're able to put together as far as a solid run, a solid result, and the speed that we have.
So a few weeks ago, I was watching, I'm addicted to the Tubi channel, the old NASCAR, where they show all the old races. And they were
Yeah.
showing a Atlanta race from around 2004, 5, somewhere in there. And there's little John Hunter Nemechek in his fire suit in the pits watching his dad race. And it made me wonder, what was it like for you growing up in this environment around this sport?
Uh, It was amazing. I think being able to grow up in this sport was absolutely amazing. I think that it has taught me a lot. It's helped me grow as a person from a really young age. I've had to mature really quickly, and being able to learn the ins and outs of the sport, the business side of it, being one of the guys on the team per se, having a headset on super early in age, right? Being able to listen to driver, crew chief, spotter communications, how they talk about the car, the changes they're making. I don't know. I love racing. I love the competitiveness of it, and being able to grow up in it. It was a pretty good childhood.
So do you pinch yourself now that you're one of those guys? Because I was at that race that they were showing. It just makes me feel old. But do you just kind of go, oh my gosh, now that's me?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So life for me has definitely come full circle. So having 2 little girls now, both of them going to the racetrack at 2 weeks old for the first time, kind of same thing that I did growing up at the racetrack, traveling to quite a few races during the year, playing in the driver owner lot with the other kids. That's the way I grew up. And it's really a surreal moment to think that life has really come full circle, and it's the same way that I grew up is the way that they're growing up, and it's really, really neat.
By the way, if you just want to completely lose track of time, that channel is the channel to go to. Like I'll like look up and it's like 5 hours later, I've been watching old races. It's crazy.
Dang.
Final question, looking ahead to the rest of the season, when the year is over, what do you want to be able to say most about this year for you?
Uh, I think the biggest thing for me is how much I improved as a driver, how much we improved as a team at Legacy Motor Club. I think that those two are some really big key takeaways from this year. Like I said earlier, we talked about consistency. We talked about trying to run top 20 every week. And those are realistic goals that are set. Last year, right, we had a lot of ups and a lot of downs. There were some really good weeks and some really bad weeks. So you're going to have that sometimes, but trying to be consistent is probably one of the hardest things through the year. Our schedule being 38 races, and it's going to be a grind this year from post Easter weekend on until the end, when we wrap up in Phoenix in November. Every week racing, it's going to be challenging, but all in all, it's what we love to do, and hopefully we can come out of that saying that we improved a lot this year.
For my final thought today, I want to talk about Bristol. This racetrack, this is my racetrack. I live 6 miles from the track approximately. I love it here. Drivers love it. Most fans you talk to love it, which is why I cannot really understand why the spring race just doesn't seem to draw a crowd. And by a crowd, I mean night race type numbers or 2000s type numbers, because there's going to be a pretty big crowd this weekend. This is a huge arena. It holds over 100,000 people. 60,000 people in this place looks pretty empty, but 60,000 people is like 2 Martinsvilles. Like, it's a huge amount of people. But I guess when they moved off the dirt and people were complaining about how much they hated the dirt, I was hoping to see a little bit more of a revival at this track. You can say you hate this configuration, but you cannot hate what you saw last spring in this race. It was darn entertaining. It was a really good race. It was a lot of fun. You didn't really know what was going to happen. It had twists. It had turns. Isn't that what we want out of racing? Isn't that what the people have been clamoring for? So I hope this weekend, and I hope going forward, that we will get more people coming back to the spring race in Bristol, because honestly, and I know I'm biased, I think this track deserves it. Thanks for joining us on the Backstretch. We'll see you next week.